I never thought the first person to kiss me would show up on the big screen just 3 days later. What's even funnier is, no one in the world knew he'd just been sleeping in the room next to mine. That morning, as I was making coffee in the small kitchen of the rental house, my phone buzzed nonstop. 17 messages. For missed calls. Entertainment news flooding the screen. Preston Hale missing after the premiere ends. Management team refuses to disclose actor's whereabouts. Fans worried as Preston vanishes for 72 hours. I looked up at the second floor. The bedroom door was still closed. Behind that door was the man the entire country was searching for. He was asleep, wearing my old t-shirt. If anyone had told me this a month ago, I would have thought they'd been watching too many movies. But this was real. And if I have to tell the whole story, then everything started the day I decided to post an ad that wasn't special at all. Room for rent. Just 4 words. 4 words that changed my whole life. My name is Mitchell Carter. I was 22 then, just starting my final year at a university in Oregon. I was studying architecture. Not the standout type of student. Didn't play basketball. Wasn't in student government. Not the kind of person the whole lecture hall would turn to look at when he walked in. I was just an ordinary guy who liked drawing houses, liked black coffee, and always got home before Tenant night. Friends often said my life looked like a straight line. Go to class. Go to my part-time job. Come home. Repeat. Maybe they were right. If there was one thing that made me different from the other guys in my class, it was that I always had to pretend. Pretend not to notice when a football player took his shirt off after practice. Pretend to agree whenever my friends talked about pretty girls. Pretend my heart never raced because of a man. I'd never come out. Not because I was ashamed, but because I grew up in a small town where people remembered each other's names longer than they remembered their own birthdays. I just wanted a quiet life, until my roommate moved out. Luke got a job offer in Seattle earlier than expected. Only 3 weeks left until rent was due. If I couldn't find a replacement, I'd have to cover the whole rent myself. That was impossible on a campus coffee shop salary. So that night, I took a few photos of the empty room. A bed, a desk, a window looking out at the maple tree in the front yard. Then posted it online. Not expecting much. By the next morning, more than 30 people had already asked. Mostly students. A few already had families. There was even a 50-year-old guy I had to politely turn down. Around 3 in the afternoon, I got a very strange email. No profile picture. No personal information. Just exactly 2 lines. I need to rent a room for about a month. If possible, I'd like to see the room after dark. I read it over and over. After dark? I frowned. Usually students tried to see rooms during the day. I replied that 8 o'clock in the evening would work. Exactly 8 o'clock. The doorbell rang. Through the little window pane by the door, I saw a man in a black jacket, wearing a baseball cap and a face mask. What caught my attention wasn't his clothes. It was the end of the street. 2 cars were parked almost 100 meters from my house. Engines still running, as if waiting for someone. When I opened the door, the man stepped in immediately and closed it behind himself. He looked through the gap in the curtains, watching the street, watching both cars. Nearly a minute passed before he let out a quiet breath. Sorry. That was the first thing he said. I'm a bit careful. I gave an awkward smile. It's fine. Can I see the room? Of course. We went up to the second floor. He examined everything closely. Not a quick glance. He opened the window, checked the lock, studied the emergency exit behind the house. Even asked whether this wall had good soundproofing. I started to find it strange. He seemed more like someone looking for a place to hide than a place to live. Going back down the stairs, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Sorry. Can I ask you something? He nodded. Who are you hiding from? The man burst out laughing. A very beautiful laugh, but carrying a helpless edge. About a few hundred photographers. I thought he was joking, until he took off his mask. In that moment, my whole body froze. I recognized that face instantly, not because I was a fan, but because for the past 2 months that face had been everywhere. On billboards along the highway, on buses, in movie theaters, on magazine covers by the checkout counter at the supermarket.
프레스톤 할레.
The most famous movie star in Hollywood at the time. And me, just a student standing frozen on the staircase, trying to convince myself this wasn't a dream. I looked at Preston. Preston looked at me. The silence between us stretched so long I could hear the old clock in the living room ticking out every beat. Finally, he was the one who spoke first. If you're planning to take a selfie, please wait until after I've rented the room. I blinked. What? He shrugged. At least let me know I have a place to live before that photo shows up online. I laughed, not because the line was funny, but because it eased the tension in the air. I wasn't planning to take a photo. Really? I wasn't planning to post it online either. Preston narrowed his eyes at me, as if trying to guess whether I was telling the truth or just being polite. Why? I was honest. Because I don't want to bother you. He paused. A strange expression passed over his face. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't surprise either. It was more like, it had been a very long time since he'd heard something so ordinary. I forgot what it felt like to be treated like a normal person. He smiled softly. It feels better than I expected. I invited him to sit in the living room. The old sofa creaked when Preston sat down. If my college friends could see this, they'd definitely think I was filming some reality show. Should I make coffee? Sure. I only have the cheap stuff. Perfect. I'm sick of 5-star coffee. I laughed again. There was something about Preston that was very different from his on-screen image. In movies, he was always the perfect kind of man. Cool. Charming. Never losing control. But the person sitting in front of me now looked like someone who hadn't slept well in days. I set 2 cups of coffee on the table. He picked one up, took a deep breath. This smell. That bad?
No.
He shook his head. It smells like home. That line left me not knowing how to respond. After a few minutes of silence, Preston spoke up first. I guess you have a lot of questions.
이도.
Go ahead. Why this house? He rested his elbows on his knees. Do you want the short answer or the long one? Long. I thought so too. He looked out the window. The sunset was slowly painting the trees in the yard red. I just finished the press tour for my new movie. From Los Angeles to New York, Chicago, Boston. 12 cities in less than 3 weeks. I slept on planes more than in beds. I smiled at thousands of people. Answered the same question hundreds of times. Then one morning I woke up, and I couldn't remember the last time I walked outside without someone chasing after me. He took a sip of coffee. I needed to disappear. Not from the work. From my own image. I nodded slightly. I hired a company that specializes in finding secret places to stay. They don't pick hotels. They don't pick luxury apartments. They find places no one would ever expect. And they found your room. My eyes went wide. There's a company that does that? Hollywood has every kind of company you can imagine. We laughed together. Then Preston pulled a stack of papers from his backpack. It was a non-disclosure agreement. I need you to sign this. I know it sounds strange, but if this address gets out, within a few hours there'll be dozens of paparazzi lined up on the street. I flipped through the pages. The terms weren't too complicated. Just a requirement not to reveal his residence during the rental period. I understand. I'll sign. He looked at me surprised. You're not going to read all of it? I trust you. You shouldn't trust people that easily. I don't trust people. I smiled. I only trust the person sitting in front of me. Preston fell silent. He looked at me for a long time. So long I had to look away first. I like you. He said it very naturally. I mean, as a roommate. Same here. At the time, I had absolutely no idea that later on, that one line alone would make both of us blush every time we remembered it. Preston moved his things in around midnight. No moving truck. No assistant.
No bodyguard.
Just one white van. And 3 suitcases. All your belongings? I was surprised. He laughed.
No.
Just everything I wanted to bring. One suitcase full of clothes. One full of books. The last one, full of movie scripts. I helped carry them upstairs. When I opened the suitcase of books, I couldn't help but be surprised. All novels. Some with worn spines from being read so many times. I thought actors only read scripts. I used to think architecture students only read blueprints. I laughed. That stung a little.
Sorry. No.
I like that kind of joke. That night, after Preston finished settling into his room, I went back to mine. The two rooms were separated by just one wall. I lay looking up at the ceiling. Everything had happened so fast. That morning I'd been worrying about not having enough for rent. By night, I had a roommate who was Hollywood's most famous star. But what I thought about most wasn't Preston's fame. It was the look in his eyes when he said, I forgot what it felt like to live like a normal person. I don't know why, but I had a feeling that the coming month wouldn't just change his life. It would change my heart too. The first morning Preston lived with me began with a fire alarm. Not because of an actual fire, because of me. I was never a good cook. Most of the time I just lived off sandwiches, cereal, or food from the campus cafeteria. But that morning, thinking there was a new person in the house, I decided to try making the egg rolls my mom once taught me. The result was, the moment I turned my back to grab the salt, the pan started smoking. 3 seconds later, the fire alarm blared. Damn it! I scrambled for a towel, not even sure whether to open the window or turn off the stove first, when Preston's door burst open. He rushed downstairs in a gray t-shirt and sweatpants, hair a mess from just waking up. Mitchell, are you okay? I burned breakfast. Preston froze for a few seconds, then looked at the blackened pan on the stove. Then, he burst out laughing. The kind of laugh with no restraint at all. Head tipped back slightly, shoulders shaking over and over.
I'm sorry.
I was both embarrassed and amused. This isn't the welcome I meant to give you. I know. He was still laughing. But it's a lot more interesting. Nearly 10 minutes passed before the alarm finally went quiet. The kitchen was filled with smoke. I threw open every window. Preston leaned against the counter. Let me. What? Cook. You can cook? I lived alone before I got famous. I didn't always have a personal chef. 15 minutes later, in front of me sat 2 plates of scrambled eggs, toast, and bacon. It looked better than anything I'd ever made. I'm starting to feel like this is unfair. Why? You're handsome, great at acting, and now you cook well too. Preston took a bite of toast. Don't put me on a pedestal. I have flaws too. Like what? He thought about it very seriously. I fold laundry terribly. I laughed. That's all. There's more. But you'd have to live with me to find out. I didn't notice I'd been smiling for almost a full minute. That afternoon I went to class. It was the last week before midterm break, so professors were piling on assignments. I nearly forgot Preston was even at home, until around 3 o'clock. My phone buzzed. A text from his number. Preston, is there a grocery store near campus? I replied right away. Mitchell, yeah. 10-minute walk. Preston, great. 2 minutes later. Mitchell, don't go. No reply. I called immediately. 3 rings. He picked up. Hello. Where are you? On my way. Don't go to the store. Why? I'll buy it for you. Silence on the other end. I just wanted to get milk. You'll get recognized.
I'm wearing a hot.
Not enough. I've got a mask on. Still not enough. Right then, I heard someone shout in the background. Oh my God. That's Preston Hale. I closed my eyes. Too late. 5 minutes later, my phone was flooded with notifications. A 10-second video had already appeared online. Preston clutching 2 cartons of milk, running out of the store while people shouted around him. The clip's caption read, Preston Hale mysteriously spotted in small college town. I immediately asked my professor for permission to leave class. When I got home, Preston was sitting in the living room. Hat still on. Mask still on. But his expression was defeated.
I'm sorry.
He spoke first. I've blown this area's cover. I thought I was just buying milk. I forgot. People still recognize me. I sat down across from him. It's fine. At least they don't know you live here. I hate that feeling. I just wanted to do something normal. I understand.
No.
He shook his head. You don't understand. His voice grew quieter. Every time someone recognizes me, I have to become Preston Hale again. Not allowed to be tired. Not allowed to be annoyed. Not allowed to refuse. Not allowed to be silent. I have to smile. Have to sign autographs. Have to take photos. Even when all I wanted was to buy milk. I'd never thought about it that way before. Fame always looks glamorous from the outside, until you meet the person carrying it every single day. I stood up. Put your jacket on. He looked up. Where are we going? I'm taking you somewhere, where no one will bother you. 20 minutes later, we drove to an apple orchard just outside town. It was the place my parents used to take me every fall when I was a kid. On weekdays, it was almost always empty. The two of us walked among the rows of trees.
No cameras. No shouting.
Just wind carrying the scent of ripe apples. Preston breathed deeply. This is what I remember. He reached out and picked an apple, then took a huge bite. Sweet juice ran down the corner of his mouth. He laughed like a little kid. I don't remember the last time I picked an apple myself. I looked at him. That was the first smile from Preston I truly believed. Wasn't for the cameras. Wasn't for the fans. It was simply because he was happy. And somehow, seeing that smile warmed my heart in a strange way. At the time, I still told myself, it was just empathy. I had no idea. I was already taking the first steps into a love that, later on, would have no way back. The apple orchard became the first secret only the two of us knew. Not because the place was special, but because for the first time since Preston moved in, I saw him completely relaxed. He took off his hat, removed his mask, let the wind run through his slightly long brown hair. The late autumn sunlight glimmered on the shoulders of his jacket. If I hadn't known he was a famous actor, I might have just thought he was a handsome man enjoying a peaceful afternoon. Mitchell. Thank you. I'm the one who should thank you. Why? Your rent means I don't have to eat instant noodles all month. Preston laughed. That's a very practical thank you. I'm a practical person.
No.
He shook his head. I think you're just trying to seem practical. I don't understand. He looked at me very intently. You care about others more than yourself. Ever since I met you, you've always asked if I was okay, whether I'd eaten, whether I was sleeping well, but you've never once told me how you're doing. I froze slightly. It had been so long since anyone had asked me that. I laughed to deflect. I'm fine. See, he pointed at me. There it is again. I'm fine. I'm fine. Kind people always love that phrase. I know. I used to be the same way. I didn't answer. Honestly, he was right. Since I was young, I'd grown used to listening to others more than talking about myself. There were things I'd hidden for so long that even I'd forgotten what it felt like to share. On the way back, Preston suggested stopping at a small roadside diner. It was the family kind with only about 10 tables. An old, weathered sign. Country music playing softly. I looked around. No one's probably going to recognize you here. I hope so. He pulled his cap down a bit lower. We ordered burgers and fries. The owner brought the food out, smiling warmly. You boys students? I nodded. He just moved here. She looked at Preston. Study hard now? Preston answered politely. Yes, ma'am, I'll try. Once she'd walked away, we both burst out laughing. I just got cast back as a college student. Congratulations. I like this role, he said, then took a huge bite of his burger. Not keeping up appearances. Not checking his phone. No one asking for photos. That moment was ordinary to the point of being beautiful. I found myself thinking, Maybe happiness is sometimes just being able to eat dinner without having to be anyone else. We got home around 9. A couple of my housemates had just come back from a study group. Ryan was the first to see Preston. "You're..." Preston immediately raised a finger to his lips. "Shoo." Ryan froze solid. Ethan's jaw dropped. "What the..." I quickly pulled them both into the kitchen. "I'll explain." 10 minutes later, after hearing the whole story, Ryan ran a hand through his hair. "Wait, you're saying the most famous movie star in America is going to live here for a month?" "Yes, right next door." "Yeah." Ryan turned to Preston. "Are you for real?" Preston smiled. "I ask myself that same question every morning." Luckily, both Ryan and Ethan were trustworthy. They agreed to keep the secret. In exchange, Ryan asked, dead serious, "Can I brag about this to my girlfriend in 30 years? Preston laughed. "If she still doesn't know by then, sure." The atmosphere in the house quickly turned natural. We watched a football game together on TV. Ryan kept up a running commentary. Ethan finished off 2 bags of popcorn. And Preston sat in the middle of the living room like an old friend. Around midnight, Ryan and Ethan went to bed. Just me and Preston left. He was washing dishes. "I can do that," I said. "We'll split it." He replied, "I cook. You wash." "That's not fair." "Why?" "I burn the food." He laughed so hard he almost dropped a plate. "Mitchell." "Yeah. You know something? This is the first time in years I've had to compete with someone over who gets to do the dishes." I watched his back. A strange feeling crept into my chest. Warm, gentle, as if the house I'd already grown so used to had suddenly gained another breath of life. The days that followed passed by unexpectedly fast. Mornings I went to class. Afternoons I worked at the library. Evenings I came home. The only difference now was there was always a warm yellow light on in the kitchen, and Preston was usually sitting there. Some days he read scripts. Some days he read novels. Some days he just sat watching the rain fall outside the window. One evening, when I got home after a late shift, the smell of chicken soup filled the whole house. "I thought you'd be later," he said. "I made extra. I didn't want to eat alone." I set my backpack down. I don't know if it was the cold or that sentence, but my heart suddenly beat one extra beat faster. Since living with Preston, I'd slowly come to realize something. The thing I looked forward to most each day was no longer the end of class. It was the moment I opened the door and stepped into the house to see what he was doing. And that was when I started to be afraid, because I knew very well Preston was only here for 1 month, but my heart was already behaving as if he'd never leave. I began measuring time by Preston's habits, not by the calendar on the wall, not by my class schedule, but by the smallest things. Every morning, he woke up about 20 minutes before I did. No alarm needed. I only knew because every time I opened my bedroom door, the smell of coffee had already drifted down the hallway. Preston didn't make coffee with a machine. He used a glass pour-over that he'd brought with him from Los Angeles. He said pouring coffee drop by drop made a person more patient. I thought it just made me wake up slower. "Want to try?" One morning, he held the pot out to me. "I don't know how to brew it. I'll teach you." So there in the small kitchen, Preston stood behind me, gently guiding my hand as I held the kettle. "Don't pour too fast. Let the water soak in evenly. Try smelling it." I did. The scent of roasted coffee filled the air. Very rich, very warm. "What do you notice?" "I just smell coffee." He laughed. "You're a lost cause. What am I supposed to smell?" "Chocolate notes. Almond. Caramel." I made a face. "I smell Monday morning." This time Preston laughed so hard he had to grab the counter for support. "You know what? You're the first person who's dared to ruin an entire lecture about coffee. I'm just being honest." "Yeah. And that's what I like." I froze. He just said, "That's what I like." Just a very ordinary sentence. But it lingered in my head all day long. A week later, my school held its fall festival. The campus was packed with booths, music, food, clubs trying to attract new students. Ryan dragged me out from the morning. Come on. You've been stuck in the library. At least go breathe some college air. By noon, my phone buzzed. Preston. Are you at school? Mitchell, yeah. Preston. Is the festival fun? I took a photo of the quad covered in yellow leaves and sent it to him. Less than a minute later, he texted back. I miss this feeling. I stared at that line for a long time. Then I took a gamble and asked, do you want to come? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, what if I get recognized? I smiled. Then don't be Preston Hale. An hour later, he showed up at the front gate, wearing a dark blue hoodie, black framed glasses, a knit cap covering most of his hair. If you didn't look closely, it was really hard to tell it was him. Do I look like a student? He asked. Barely. Barely. You look like a 28-year-old grad student. He laughed. Better than an actor, then. We blended into the crowd. No one paid attention, at least at first. Preston looked at everything with the eager eyes of a child. An apple pie stand, a student band performing, ring toss games. I used to do this one. He pointed at the pumpkin painting contest. Back in college? Yeah. You actually went to college? I dropped out sophomore year. Why? Got my first role. He smiled faintly. I thought I'd go back later. Then. Never got the chance. For the first time, I heard something in his voice, a hint of regret. Do you regret it?
Ido.
He answered right away. Not because of my career. Because I missed out on the time when I could have been an ordinary person. We stopped in front of a group of students playing acoustic music. A guy holding a guitar. A girl singing. Not especially skilled, but full of passion. Preston stood still. I used to be like them. Used to think fame would fix everything. But actually, it just trades your old problems for new ones. I turned to look at him. Mitchell. Thank you for bringing me here. I didn't do anything. You lent me a day. A day where I got to live like I used to. That sentence made a lump rise in my throat. Just then, someone bumped lightly into Preston's shoulder. A female student. She apologized and started to walk off. But after 2 steps, she suddenly turned back, frowned, stared straight at Preston. My heart immediately started pounding. Excuse me. The girl stepped closer. Can I ask? I held my breath. Where do you get your hair cut? Preston froze for 2 seconds, then answered. In Los Angeles. Oh, thanks. The girl smiled and walked away. I turned to him. Preston was already looking at me. We both burst out laughing. For the first time in my life, he said, still laughing. I actually got away with it. I laughed along with him. But right at that moment, I realized I wasn't laughing because of what had just happened. I was laughing because I got to see him laugh. And that was when a frightening thought surfaced. I no longer just cared about Preston. I was starting to like him. Not because he was an actor. Not because he was famous. But because of the man who'd made coffee with me every morning. Who'd laughed at my burnt eggs. Who'd sat eating soup with me at midnight. Who had made that small house feel for the first time like a real home. And the thing that scared me the most was there were only a little over 2 weeks left. Then he would leave.